Hi, the purpose of this video is to look at mouse actions, and we've gone through click events, we've gone through and click action listeners, item listeners, and action listeners, and now we're going to go through mouse listeners and different things you can do for tracking what your mouse is doing in your program. And so we're going to have a little fun with this called mouse tracks. We've created a little program here called mouse tracks. And I've just got the basic outline. We've got the class mouse tracks. It extends to JFrame. We've already set up the constructor with the default close operation, and we set the size of the JFrame. Looking at the main method, we've got we're creating an instance of the main method. We're setting the size again. I guess we don't need to set it twice, so let's go ahead and get rid of that one. We're setting visible to true, and with the exit on close operation, when we click the X up in the corner, it should end our Java program. So nothing exciting here, nothing we haven't worked with before. Let's talk about the mouse listener. So let's go ahead and add, and we're going to implement the mouse listener. And of course we have to add the import for the mouse listener and the mouse listener in events. So what we want to do is just go ahead and grab all of this and again put a star on it, because we're going to need to have some mouse events. And then we need to look at and actually the nice thing about NetBeans, it's going to tell us the methods we need. So it starts right up here. Mouse tracks is not abstract and does not override the abstract method mouse exited. That tells us we need a mouse exited method, and it needs to collect the mouse event object. So again, we need to do that outside of our constructor. And if we look at this again and point to it again, it's going to tell us another one we need. We need a mouse entered, and I always like the entered before the exit, so I'm going to do that right in front here. And if that's not enough, it looks like we have to have more, because every time we look up here, it's going to tell us the next one we have to have. So we need to have a mouse released method. I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this and change the name, because there's actually a couple more methods we're going to need. And instead of mouse exited, we're going to have mouse released. Point that again, it's going to tell us we need a mouse pressed event. So again, it seems to go backwards here. And instead of mouse exited, we want to go mouse pressed. And I believe we need one more, the mouse clicked event. And yep, there we go, mouse clicked event. So put that right down here. So we have to have all these methods. Whether we're going to use them or not, we have to create a method for each one of these events. Okay. And now Java says, "Hey, okay, you've got enough methods there. I'm happy." So let's go ahead and let's put a label out here. So we're creating a new J label, and let's go ahead in our constructor here. Let's also go and create a layout. Okay, let's do, and for this, let's do a grid layout. And of course, we probably have to import something here. All right. And so then in our constructor, we can go ahead and set the layout. And let's go ahead and add our J label. In our grid layout, we have to tell it how many columns and rows. So let's go with 3, 1. 3 rows, 1 column. And so last we'll go ahead and add that J label. Simple enough. And then we want to add an action listener, and since the listener is here, but we really want to add it to the JFrame. So anytime you do anything in the JFrame, it's going to activate the mouse listener. So we can either do it this way, this dot add mouse listener, and again the listener is already tied to the same class, so it's kind of like we're going on a loop here, but it works. So we've added our mouse listener, we've added all our methods. And again, the mouse listener right here is tied to the JFrame. And that's important. We're going to do some playing with it in a little bit, but right now it's tied to the JFrame. And so there's some things we can do, and you can look at all the different things. So once we pass the mouse event to the method, so anytime there's an action, it passes the event to the method. So we can do some things here. We could let's change the output. Let's change it to the me.getPoint. me.getPoint. I'm missing something here. Oh, the problem is this is an integer, and so we could make it a string by going. So by taking a string and concatenating an integer to it, Java automatically changes it from an integer to a string. And so it's going to give us the points. Let's go ahead and run this and see what it looks like. Is there anything else we missed? We've got our frame, we've got it set up. Let's go ahead and run this. So there's our output, and it tells us what the entry point is. And every time I come into the frame, it's telling what the entry point is. Okay. And so if I look what the entry point is here, this here would probably be right about 0, 0 if I could get right at the corner of my frame. Well, I'm at 829. So that's because it's taking from the very top of the frame, and it's probably measuring this here. So I'm probably 28 from the top and 10 from the side when I come into this frame. So 876. 18162. I'm going faster than it can. There we go. So there's our entry point. And so anytime I come into the frame, it's telling me the entry point that I come into the frame from. Simple enough. That's what the entry point does. So when I'm saying entry, anytime I enter the JFrame, it's giving me that information. When I click, it doesn't do anything because we haven't tied anything to the click events, or the click methods, I should say. So let's go ahead and close this out, and let's take a look at some of the other ones. We know what the mouse enter does, and let's see what mouse exit does. We can actually, let's just copy that same thing and paste that into the mouse exited, and we'll say exit point, and save that and run it. Now you notice I can run over this all I want, but as soon as I exit the frame, it's giving me the numbers. So it's pretty clear. We know what the entry point and the exit point is, and what event, and when I exit the frame is when it triggers that event. I can zoom around the frame. I can right click, left click, and I'm clicking now, if you hear the clicks, and nothing happens, but when I exit it, it changes that value. Okay, so now we know what mouse exited is. Let's look at mouse pressed, and we can do several things. Let's go ahead and get the point, and instead of this is pressed point, let's go ahead and run that. Now nothing's there, but as soon as I click a mouse button, it tells me the point at which I click the mouse. Okay, so again, this is when I press the mouse. So if I press the mouse here and release it over here, it's two events. There's a mouse press and press. Here's a release. Let's go. So now if you notice, I'm clicking it here and I'm releasing it here. Nothing's changed. It only gives me the pressed points. Let's go ahead and add the same thing to the released. Okay, so we got the mouse pressed, and you can imagine what the mouse released is. That's when you release the mouse button. And let's run that. So we're just kind of walking through these different events tied to the different methods. So I'm going to press right here, move over here and release, and it shows you the start point. So again, press, release, press, release. So it's giving the points at which I press the button and the point at which I release the button when I release it. So there's two different events going on here. So there's the mouse press and the release event. Okay, that's good. Let's go to the mouse click event. We've done that. And you can imagine what the mouse clicked events is. And we're going to really copy the same thing here. I probably should, instead of compress, it should be released. Let's go ahead and run this. Now there's a press point and there's a click. I'm clicking on it. Now it doesn't matter where I press, it only matters where I click. So it's almost like a mouse press, but it's considering it all one event. So even if I move it and release it, it doesn't really change. It's only when I do a full click that the click event is activated. Now what we've been doing is getting the points, and this is the X point and the Y point. X is measured from the far left, Y is measured from the top, how far down from the top, how many pixels from the edge and the top of the screen. But there's other things we can get. And probably the easiest thing to do is let's go to the pressed one here, because the question is, what if what do we know if we press a left? How do we know if it's a left click or a right click? And actually I was doing both buttons. When we did that, it didn't matter. We didn't ask it to determine which button it was, whether it was a left click or right click. Pressed button, and instead of getting the point at which the button is pressed, we may want to get the modifier. We're going to get the modifiers. Now what is the modifiers? That's going to tell us which button is clicked. Let's go ahead and save that, right click, and run this file. Okay, now I'm going to click on there, and I'm clicking with the left mouse button. So the button pressed is 16. We also have something else going on here which we forgot to turn off, the mouse click. But that doesn't much matter. Let's go back and we'll keep going here. So I'm clicking the left mouse button, and the modifier is 16. Okay, and when I click the right mouse button, the modifier is 4. So anytime I click the right mouse button, it's 4. When I click the left mouse button, it's 16. And so we could actually do an if-then statement. Let's go ahead and comment that out. We could do an if-then statement, so we would say if, and we could now if we had middle button, we could be safe here and say, because we know the left button is 16. So we could assume here that if it's not the right button or the left button, it's probably the middle button. Let's try this out and see if this actually works for us. Okay, that is correct. And there's the left button. So that's telling us which button is pressed. So based off of which button is pressed, I could choose different events to happen. So okay, there we're checking we're getting the modifiers, and we're checking left and right mouse button, or if it's none of those, it's the middle mouse button. Now let's take a look at one other thing. If you noticed on these, and let's go ahead and not worry about this for now. Let's go back and look at this, not the mouse pressed, but let's look at the mouse entered event. And this is important for us to think about this. Right now we have it when we're entering the JFrame, but what if you don't want to have it so anytime it's entering the JFrame? What if you only wanted to enter a small part of it? So let's go ahead and create a J panel here. And let's go ahead and set the panel color to something else. So we got set layout. We have to do this in our constructor here. So let's do that right here. And yeah, yellow works. And then let's go ahead and add the panel. Okay, so here we've added our panel, and let's see, so everything should be pretty much the same. Well, here's what I want. I want to have it so that every time I enter just the panel, it's going to do an event. Oh, we forgot to turn on our method here. Let's go back. So I want to have the method so that anytime the mouse enters the panel, it's going to tell us what point it's entering at. So let's run this. And right now we have this tied to the frame, so it doesn't matter if I want to limit it to just the panel. Well, here it's tied to the frame, so it's really anytime the mouse enters the frame, it's triggering that event. But what we want to do is anytime that the mouse enters just this panel, we want that event triggered. So let's see how we can do that. This is where we talk about we don't always want to implement the mouse listener at the frame level. So we're going to go ahead and cut that out of there. And we're going to go down here beyond. See, we've got our main method here, so let's make sure we know where we're at. So we're going to create another class here. We're going to call this mouse panel. Okay, so we're creating a new class. Now again, this is not a subclass. This is an interior, or an inside class, or a local class to this method, because to this class. So the mousetracks is a class, and this is an internal class or a local class to that because it's inside of the class mousetracks. So let's take this mouse panel, let's take all of these methods that we created that are tied to the mouse listener. We're going to cut them. We're going to paste them into this panel. Okay, so we've created a panel and we've extended mouse listener, so it requires all of these methods anyways. And we've put all those methods inside that panel. Let's go ahead and source format. Now we want to create that other panel up here, so let's go ahead and create the now we're not going to create a J panel because this has all the properties of a J panel, but it also has a mouse listener tied to it. So in this case, I can create the mouse panel, which is basically a J panel that's extended and has properties tied to that mouse panel. And okay, so we've created a new mouse panel. And in this case, we don't want to add the mouse listener right to the frame. We actually want to add it to that panel. So we have to take and we have to add the panel here. And let's do it, let's do it here. So we're adding that panel. It's just like adding a J panel, only this time it has all this, it has the mouse listener tied to it. And then we can also go, okay. So we're taking that panel and we're adding its own mouse listener. Just like we did here with this add mouse listener to this, we're actually doing the same thing with this panel. Now again, this mouse listener is tied to a inner class that is an extension of a JPanel class. Let's see what this does for us. We have our yellow frame. We didn't put a background on there. Let's put a background on that. Let's make that frame, let's set the color of that frame red. So here we've got our panel 1. Let's do that right here. Oops. And instead of yellow, let's go red. Now let's look at this. Okay, so we have our first panel that we don't have the mouse listener tied to, which is panel 1. And when I enter and exit that, nothing happens. When I enter the second panel, which we do have the mouse listener tied to, now there's an entry point and exit point on just that panel. And this is a good example of where you would not tie the listener to the frame, but you could tie it to a subclass inside of your class there. So in this case, we're tying it to a class that represents a panel. You could have it tied to a label, so that when somebody goes over a label, it would pop up a warning, for instance, kind of like a little message box or alert box. And so there you go. You have your action listeners. And again, here we're getting the points, the entry points and exit points. And before, you've seen the getting the points, and you saw us getting the left and right mouse button. So I hope that helps you understand. Again, we're looking at all the different action items that you can use on a frames and panels, and this is a great example of how the action items, mouse actions, can be tied to either the JFrame or to a JPanel or to any other. We could extend a JButton and have this on a JButton, so anytime you went over the JButton, it would tell you that information. Hope that helps. Have a great night.